He was a man who trusted no one, not even himself. A billionaire who believed kindness was just another lie. Until one stormy night, when he decided to test the one person who had never failed him, his quiet maid. But what she did next changed everything. It wasn't money she touched, or fame she wanted. It was something far more powerful. Something that made even a man who'd lost all faith fall to his knees. Stay until the end, because the miracle you'll see isn't just theirs. It might remind you that God still works through ordinary people like us. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe, share, and leave a comment about your own small miracle. Thank you for being here. May God bless you, always. The first cold of a Montana fall rolled in like a stern warden, sweeping across the Bridger Mountains and whispering down through the empty plains that framed the city of Bozeman. By dawn, frost glazed every roof tile, and the wind carried a sharpness that made the air taste like steel. Out on the hill stood Coal Ridge Estate, a stone and glass fortress that had watched over the town for nearly 2 decades, elegant, vast, and cold in both design and spirit. Inside, silence ruled. Not the peace of contentment, but the kind of silence that lingers in a house where no one laughs. Every surface gleamed, every portrait hung perfectly level. The only warmth came from the golden light spilling through the tall windows, glancing off polished floors that seemed too clean to walk on. At the end of the long hall, Ethan Cole adjusted his tie beneath a black and white portrait of a smiling woman, his late mother, whose laughter once filled this place. She had died 10 years earlier, and since then, Ethan had built walls thicker than the ones that surrounded the estate. Ethan was 35, tall and sharply cut, the kind of man whose stillness drew attention more than any words could. His features were defined, a straight nose, strong jaw, and eyes the color of cold smoke. A faint shadow of stubble framed his face, giving him a rugged, unapproachable air. His dark hair was kept short, disciplined, like everything else in his life. He had inherited both fortune and caution. When he was 19, a man his father trusted, a partner, a friend, had stolen millions, leaving the family name in ruins. Ethan's father drank himself into silence afterward. Ethan rebuilt it all, layer by layer, from real estate to high-end resorts, until Cole once again stood for power. But with every success came distance. The man who had rebuilt his family's empire had forgotten how to let anyone in. Downstairs, Margaret O'Neill, the head housekeeper, tightened her gray cardigan and checked the schedule one last time. She was 58, compact and practical, with silver streaks in her chestnut bob and eyes that had seen everything, from gala chaos to broken hearts. She ran the estate with quiet precision and a soft Irish lilt that could calm even the most stubborn staff. Today, however, her calm was laced with curiosity. The 15th maid in 12 months was due to arrive, a number she prayed would finally break the curse. "If this one lasts longer than a week," she muttered, "I'll start lighting candles again." At precisely 9 o'clock, the crunch of tires on gravel broke the morning stillness. A small gray sedan stopped at the foot of the marble steps. The door opened, and a young woman stepped out, holding a worn leather suitcase. Lillian Hart stood tall, about 5'7", slender but not fragile. Her posture was refined, the kind of grace that doesn't come from charm school, but from discipline. Her coat was long and gray, buttoned to the throat, her skirt modest and pressed. Strands of light brown hair slipped free from a loose twist, catching the faint sunlight. Her complexion was fair, Her eyes hazel green and intelligent, like she was seeing the world and measuring what it could take from her. There was nothing of luxury left about her except the way she carried herself, like someone who once belonged to another world, but refused to let hardship make her bitter. "Miss Hart?" Margaret called, stepping onto the porch. "Yes, ma'am." Lillian's voice was soft but steady. She carried neither desperation nor pride, only quiet resolve. Inside, the foyer swallowed her footsteps, the marble echoing faintly. Margaret was about to speak again when a low growl rumbled from the side hallway. From the shadows emerged Rex, the German shepherd that guarded the Cole estate as fiercely as any security system. His black and tan coat gleamed, every muscle taut beneath his fur. At 4 years old, Rex was powerful, disciplined, and deeply loyal to only one person, Ethan Cole. He moved closer, eyes fixed on the newcomer. Margaret sighed. "Don't take it personal, dear. He's not fond of strangers." But Lillian didn't flinch. She crouched slowly, keeping her eyes level but gentle. "Hey there, boy," she murmured, extending her hand palm down. "You're just doing your job, aren't you?" Rex sniffed her fingers, paused, then pressed his head against her hand. His tail brushed once against the marble floor. Margaret blinked. "Well, I'll be damned," a deep voice came from the staircase. "He's never done that before." Ethan descended, jacket unbuttoned, gray eyes flicking from Rex to the young woman. He studied her like one might inspect a new painting, searching for forgery beneath the polish. "Mr. Cole," she greeted, straightening. "Ms. Hart," he said evenly. "You've read the contract?" "Yes, sir. 1-month trial. Live-in position." "And you understand this job isn't for everyone?" "I understand," she said. "I've had harder ones." He didn't miss the hesitation in her voice. "You've moved a lot," he said. "New York, Dallas, Seattle, short stays, all of them." Lillian nodded. "I didn't leave because I couldn't do the work, Mr. Cole. I left because people tend to change once they think you're beneath them." That earned a flicker of something in his eyes. Not warmth, but recognition. "Why this job?" he asked. "Because I'm good at taking care of things," she said, and after a beat, added quietly, "and because no one else would give me the chance." For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was Rex shifting his weight, his ears pricked toward the window where the wind scratched against the glass. Ethan turned toward Margaret. "Show her the quarters. We'll see how long this one lasts." "Yes, sir," Margaret said, motioning Lillian to follow. They passed through long halls of soft light and echoing floors. Margaret pointed out each room, the kitchen that smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish, the library filled with dark oak and dustless books, and the staff wing with its narrow staircases and polished banisters. In the kitchen, Sarah Delgado, the pastry chef, looked up from kneading dough. She was in her early 30s, with caramel skin, full cheeks, and a scarf tied over glossy black hair. Her hands were dusted with flour, her smile genuine. "You must be the new girl," she said warmly. "Here, try this." She pressed a small golden scone into Lillian's hand. "Eat before Mr. Cole gives you his stare too long. It could freeze soup." Lillian laughed softly for the first time that morning. "Thank you. I'll remember that." By the time Margaret showed her the small staff room overlooking the eastern field, Lillian felt a quiet sense of belonging she hadn't expected. The room was simple: a single bed, a small desk, a narrow window framing the gray horizon. She set down her suitcase and opened it. 2 dresses, a folded sweater, a photo of her parents. Her mother's smile in the photo was the same as in her memory: kind, unguarded, unaware of the storm that would one day come. When her father's company collapsed under debts and betrayal, her parents hadn't survived the shame. Their deaths left her alone, with unfinished schooling and creditors knocking. She had worked wherever someone would hire her, never stealing, never complaining. Gratitude was her only currency now. She stood for a moment by the window, exhaling slowly. Outside, the clouds dragged themselves over the mountains. Somewhere in the distance, Rex barked once, a deep, resonant sound that felt less like warning and more like acknowledgement. Down in his office, Ethan watched the security monitors flicker. On one screen, Lillian was adjusting the drapes in the guest suite, aligning each fold with quiet precision. She didn't rush. She didn't fidget. She simply did what needed to be done. Perfectly. He leaned back, fingers steepled under his chin. "Too careful," he muttered. "No one's that perfect." Rex appeared at the doorway, tail wagging once, low and steady. Ethan looked at the dog, then at the screen again. "We'll see, boy," he said under his breath. "We'll see what she does when no one's watching." That night, as the last light drained from the sky, the Coal Ridge estate stood against the wind like a monument to control and silence. But somewhere deep inside its marble heart, something small had changed. The kind of shift you don't hear, only feel, like the first crack in a frozen river waiting for spring. Morning at Coal Ridge Estate arrived pale and cold, the kind of morning that made even sunlight seem reluctant to touch the ground. Frost still clung to the window panes, and the air smelled faintly of pine and iron. From his office upstairs, Ethan Cole watched the day begin through the wide glass wall, one hand resting absently on the head of Rex, who sat alert beside him. The dog's tail thumped once, a quiet metronome of loyalty. Below, Lillian Hart crossed the courtyard, her steps brisk, head slightly bowed against the wind. Even from this distance, Ethan could tell her movements were precise, no wasted effort, no hesitation. It had been 3 weeks since she arrived, and nothing about her had cracked. She worked from dawn until the last light died, spoke only when necessary, and seemed to vanish into whatever room needed her most. Ethan had seen every type of staff member pass through these halls, those who gossiped, those who took what they thought no one would miss, those who hid laziness behind flattery. But Lillian was different. She carried herself like someone who once had something to lose and had already lost it. Later that morning, as he reviewed design layouts for a downtown development project, Rex padded in carrying something soft in his mouth. "What have you got there?" Ethan asked. The dog placed it gently on the desk, a small, weathered notebook bound in canvas. Ethan turned it over. No name, just faint initials burned into the corner. LH. He hesitated, thumb grazing the cover. "Where did you find this, boy?" Rex only tilted his head, ears pricking. Ethan sighed, opening the book. Inside, the handwriting was neat, small, and deliberate. Not the messy scrawl of quick notes, but the controlled script of someone taught in private schools and old habits of precision. On the first page, written in clean black ink, was a single line. "Don't let what you've lost make you forget who you are." Ethan sat back, eyes narrowing. The quote struck deeper than he wanted to admit. He turned more pages, short reflections, sketches of flowers, fragments of medical terminology, a few journal-like entries about patients and research rounds. She wasn't just some wandering maid. She had studied medicine, or at least tried to. "Lillian Hart," he murmured. "Who are you really?" That afternoon, Margaret O'Neill came to his office carrying a tray of coffee. You've been watching her again, haven't you? She said, with a knowing smirk as she set down the cup. Ethan didn't answer. You've worked here long enough to know I don't like mysteries under my roof. Margaret chuckled softly. Then you're in the wrong business, dear. People are full of mysteries, most of them harmless. She's not like the others, he said. No, Margaret agreed. She's better. He looked up sharply. You like her that much? I like the way Rex likes her, she replied simply, and left before he could argue. Outside, the wind began to pick up. Lillian was kneeling by the rose beds, pruning back the frost-burned stems. The roses wouldn't bloom again until spring, but she treated them as though they were already alive. Beside her stood Jonah Park, the estate's groundskeeper. Jonah was in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered and calm, his hands rough from years of work in both soil and stone. His dark hair was peppered with gray, and his brown eyes carried a quiet humor that rarely reached his lips. Born in Portland to a family of fishermen, Jonah had lost his younger brother in a river accident when he was 17. Since then, he had learned to measure life by what could be tended and what couldn't be saved. Most people don't bother trimming roses this time of year, Jonah said, watching Lillian work. They still breathe, she answered, not looking up. Even when they look dead. Jonah studied her a moment. You talk like someone who's lost more than flowers. She paused, then gave him a faint smile. Maybe, but loss teaches you how to hold on to small things. He nodded, satisfied with that, and walked off to check the irrigation valves. Ethan watched the exchange from his office, the notebook still open beside his coffee. He couldn't shake the sense that Lillian's calm was not ignorance, but survival. People who'd known ease didn't move like that. They didn't measure every breath as if it might cost something. That evening, as the house settled into quiet, Lillian passed by the open study door and saw Rex lying near Ethan's desk. He's waiting for you to stop working, she said gently. Ethan looked up from his screen. He waits for everyone. It's his job. Dogs don't wait for everyone, she said, just for the ones they think need company. Ethan almost smiled, then caught himself. You dropped this, he said, holding up the notebook. Her face stilled. Where did you? Rex brought it to me, he said. Interesting entries. You studied medicine? She hesitated. I did. For a while. What happened? The world happened, she said quietly. He gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing. Tell me, he pressed, his voice even. You write like someone educated. You work like someone who doesn't belong here. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her apron. My father was William Hart, of Hart and Myers Investments. Maybe you've heard the name. Ethan blinked. He had. The company had collapsed 7 years ago amid one of the biggest fraud scandals in New York's history. They weren't criminals, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. They trusted the wrong people. The man who ran the fund disappeared. My parents lost everything. My father couldn't bear the shame. He had a heart attack 2 months. Later, my mother followed not long after. Debt collectors sold the house, the cars, everything. I left school. There wasn't anyone else to pay for it. Ethan sat silent. He had heard countless tragedies in boardrooms and charity letters, but this one landed differently, maybe because he knew that kind of betrayal himself. I'm sorry, he said finally, and meant it. Lillian shook her head. Don't be. It taught me something important. That dignity doesn't depend on where you sleep, but how you wake up. Rex rose and patted over, placing his head gently against her thigh. She stroked his fur, her face softening. "He's a good judge of character," she said. Ethan leaned back. "You shouldn't have to prove yours." She looked up. "Don't I?" The question hung in the room long after she left. Later that night, Ethan sat by the window, the house dark except for the glow of a single desk lamp. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft and slow, muffling the world. He reached for the notebook again and read the first line once more. "Don't let what you've lost make you forget who you are." Somewhere in the quiet, he realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd known who he was beyond contracts and walls. Rex shifted beside him with a low sigh, head resting on his paws. Ethan looked down at the dog. "You're right, boy," he said under his breath. "She's not like the others." And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel so empty. The storm began without warning. One of those restless Montana nights when the sky seemed to unravel all at once. Clouds thickened over the mountains. The air grew heavy, and by dusk, the first drops of rain had already begun to fall against the tall windows of Coal Ridge Estate. The wind whistled through the pines, carrying the scent of wet bark and the faint electricity of something waiting to break. Inside the great house, the warmth from the fireplaces fought against the storm's chill, but tension lingered like a shadow Ethan Cole couldn't quite dispel. He sat in his office, staring at the security monitors that glowed in the dim light. Each screen showed a different corner of his home: the marble hall, the kitchen, the garden, and the living room. On one screen, Lillian Hart was dusting the bookshelves, her hair slightly undone from the day's work. 3 weeks of perfection. Not a mistake, not a complaint, not even a moment of frustration. Ethan's logical mind refused to believe in such purity. "No one's that good," he muttered under his breath. Rex, lying at his feet, lifted his head and gave a quiet rumble, as though disagreeing. Ethan reached down, scratching behind the German shepherd's ear. "You like her too much," he said softly. "That's the problem." Rex thumped his tail twice, indifferent to his master's skepticism. He thought of her notebook, of that line that had carved itself into his mind. "Don't let what you've lost make you forget who you are." It had haunted him more than he cared to admit. The words belonged to someone who had known ruin but chose not to drown in it. Still, Ethan needed proof. He needed to know if her kindness was genuine or just another mask. That night, he prepared the test. The living room was set like a stage. On the oak coffee table lay his black leather wallet, a gold money clip holding several crisp $100 bills, and his platinum watch resting near the edge. The fire burned low, casting soft amber light across the room. Rex settled beside the sofa, ears alert. Ethan loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves, and stretched out on the couch. His breathing slowed, his eyes half closed, the practiced stillness of a man used to control. Behind a framed painting, one of the cameras watched quietly, its lens catching every detail. "Stay," he whispered to Rex. The dog's gaze flickered between the door and his master, understanding more than a human might think. The clock ticked softly. Rain thickened, tapping the glass in steady rhythm. Ethan waited. Footsteps approached. Soft, measured, Lillian's. She paused at the threshold, her silhouette framed by the glow of the hallway light. She hesitated, listening, then stepped in. Her gray dress brushed lightly against her calves, the hem damp from the rain where she had likely checked the windows upstairs. Her braid had loosened. Strands of hair framed her face in soft curls. She moved, quietly, almost reverently, scanning the room before noticing him on the couch. "Mr. Cole?" she said softly. No response. His breathing stayed even, convincing. She took another step and noticed the items on the table. The wallet, the cash, the watch, deliberately arranged, perfectly tempting. For a long moment, she stood still. Ethan could hear his own pulse, slow and deliberate, as if time itself had joined in his test. Lillian exhaled lightly, then moved, not toward the table, but around it. She picked up the empty teacup he had left earlier and placed it on the tray. Then she noticed the window cracked open. Crossing to it, she pulled the latch closed, keeping the rain from sneaking in. Her hand brushed the curtain, smoothing its fold as if to tidy the storm itself. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He wanted her to fail, wanted the relief of being right about people again. But she didn't fail. She didn't even hesitate. Then she turned back toward the table. Her eyes lingered on the stack of bills. Slowly, she picked up the hardcover book that lay nearby and placed it gently on top of the money, shielding it from sight, as though it were something indecent to leave exposed. Rex's ears twitched. The dog's tail moved once, slow, a silent approval. Lillian turned to Ethan again. She approached quietly, the floor creaking faintly under her step. He could feel her presence even with his eyes closed, the faint rustle of her skirt, the warmth of someone standing near. She reached for the throw blanket folded over the armchair. "Always working too late," she murmured under her breath, and draped the blanket across his shoulders. Her hand paused near his temple, brushing a stray lock of hair aside with a touch so gentle it was almost reverent. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to sound real. "For giving me this chance." Ethan's throat tightened. Every wall he'd built in the past 15 years, the mistrust, the calculations, the control, cracked under the weight of that one sentence. When she turned to leave, Rex rose silently and followed her to the doorway. She stopped to pat his head. "Good night, soldier," she said with a faint smile. Ethan opened his eyes only after the door clicked shut. The sound of rain filled the silence. He stared at the ceiling for a long while, then at the table where the book still rested neatly atop the money. Rex padded back to the sofa and placed his head on Ethan's chest. The man let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "You were right, boy," he whispered. "You always are." Outside, the rain softened to a whisper, washing against the glass in slow rhythm. Ethan rose, crossing to the window. The reflection of his own face looked back at him, tired, human. In the reflection behind him, the untouched table glowed faintly under the lamplight, a quiet monument to something he hadn't felt in years: trust. He poured himself a small glass of whiskey and sat back down, watching the fire burn low. For once, his mind refused to analyze. There was nothing to prove, no data to measure. Only a feeling that settled like warmth in the chest. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, not everyone in the world was out to take something from him. As the storm eased, the smell of wet earth seeped into the house through the vents. He thought of his mother's old saying, "Rain washes what pride can't." Perhaps she had been right. In the dim light, Rex raised his head and huffed softly, as if urging him toward rest. Ethan reached down and scratched the dog's neck, smiling faintly. "All right," he said. "We'll give her the benefit of the doubt, for now." But even as he said it, he knew the decision had already been made. Somewhere between suspicion and silence, trust had taken root. And outside, the rain continued to fall, gentle now, as though the world itself had decided to start over. The day of the charity gala dawned bright and deceptive. A perfect Montana morning dressed in the kind of sunshine that made even glass walls gleam like crystal. By evening, however, the temperature had dropped. The air sharpened with mountain chill, and the Coleridge estate glowed with warm light and quiet elegance. Strings of fairy bulbs looped across the garden, chandeliers flickered above polished tables, and the air was thick with perfume and murmurs of the wealthy. Ethan Cole adjusted his cufflinks in the reflection of the hallway mirror, his expression as composed as the knot of his tie. He had hosted countless events like this, gatherings of donors, partners, and benefactors who traded smiles the way others traded currency. But tonight felt different, not because of the cause or the money, but because of the quiet presence working in the background. Lillian Hart, dressed in the estate's formal uniform of gray silk and white apron, moving gracefully among the guests. She didn't belong to their world, not anymore, and yet she carried herself with the kind of unspoken dignity that made even the pearls and diamonds of Bozeman's elite look gaudy. Ethan caught himself watching her too often, not out of suspicion this time, but something he wasn't ready to name. Rex stayed close to his side as always, his black and tan coat shining under the light. Every movement silent but alert. Guests often marveled at how the German Shepherd seemed almost human in awareness, 4 years old and trained beyond perfection, yet somehow capable of understanding far more than commands. As the guests mingled, laughter and champagne filled the great hall. Margaret O'Neill, ever the commander of staff, ensured the evening ran seamlessly. Her silver-streaked hair was pinned neatly back, and her eyes scanned the room with practiced precision. From the kitchen, Sarah Delgado, flour still dusting her sleeves despite her best efforts, peeked out now and then to ensure her delicate lemon tarts survived the journey from tray to plate. Among the arriving guests was Eleanor Crestwood, a woman impossible to ignore even if one tried. She was in her early 50s, tall and willowy, with hair the color of aged copper, sculpted into perfection that spoke of money and mirrors. Her dress shimmered in pale champagne tones, and her voice, melodic, sharp-edged, carried effortlessly across the room. Eleanor had once been the wife of a senator and was now the patron of several art charities, a woman who collected both paintings and rumors with equal passion. "Mr. Cole," she said, gliding toward him, always the gracious host. "Mrs. Crestwood," Ethan replied smoothly, though his politeness was armor, not warmth. He had dealt with her before. Her compliments were sugar-coated traps, her smiles calculated to measure worth. She leaned closer. "And this must be your new staff edition." Her gaze flicked toward Lillian, who was serving drinks nearby. "Pretty little thing. Doesn't quite fit in, does she?" Ethan's expression didn't shift. "She fits where she's needed," he said curtly. Eleanor's lips curved. "Of course she does." Hours passed. The gala unfolded flawlessly. The music swelled. Laughter rippled through the halls, and even Ethan allowed himself a faint exhale of satisfaction. But perfection never lasts long in houses built on old wounds. It began quietly, a sharp intake of breath from one of the guests, a murmur spreading like fire through dry grass. Then Eleanor Crestwood's voice rose, cutting clean through the orchestra. "My necklace," she exclaimed, one manicured hand flying to her throat. "It's gone." The music faltered. Conversations stilled. The guests turned as one, eyes gleaming with curiosity more than concern. Ethan stepped forward, calm but commanding. "We'll find it," he said. "Please, everyone, stay where you are." Eleanor clutched her clutch bag dramatically. "I saw the Maid. That one." Her finger pointed straight at Lillian, who froze mid-step, the tray trembling slightly in her hands. The room inhaled collectively. Lillian's face paled, her eyes darting from the accusing finger to Ethan. She didn't speak. She didn't plead. She simply set the tray down and folded her hands in front of her apron, standing upright as though awaiting a sentence she already knew. Margaret stepped forward quickly. "That's enough, Mrs. Crestwood. Lillian has worked here for nearly a month without a single issue." Eleanor cut her off with a laugh, sharp as glass. "Of course she has. That's what makes them so clever, isn't it? The quiet ones, the grateful ones, always pretending humility until the moment temptation wins." Ethan's jaw tightened. He turned to Lillian. "Is it true?" Her voice, when it came, was soft. "No, sir." "Then say something," he urged, lowering his tone. "Defend yourself." But she only shook her head. It wouldn't matter. Before he could respond, Rex suddenly rose from where he'd been lying. His ears pricked forward, muscles tense, eyes locked not on Lillian, but on Eleanor Crestwood herself. Then he growled, low, deep, unmistakably accusatory. The room froze. Ethan's gaze snapped to the older woman. "Rex," he warned. But the dog ignored him, stalking forward with the deliberate precision of a soldier following scent. He stopped at Eleanor's side and nosed at her jeweled clutch. Eleanor's laugh faltered. "Get that animal away from me." Ethan stepped closer. "Open it," he said quietly. "What?" "Your bag." Her face flushed red. "How dare you?" But Margaret was already there, her tone firm and polite in a way that left no room for refusal. "Please, Mrs. Crestwood, it'll put this to rest." Reluctantly, Eleanor opened the bag clutch, and there, gleaming against the silk lining, lay the missing necklace. Gasps filled the room. Eleanor stumbled for words. Someone must have—" "No one planted it," Ethan said evenly. "You accused a woman of theft to humiliate her." His voice carried not anger, but disappointment that cut deeper. He turned toward Lillian. "You have my apology," he said, his voice soft but sure, audible to everyone in the room. "You didn't deserve this." Lillian met his gaze, her eyes shimmering under the golden light. "Thank you," she whispered. Later, when the guests had dispersed and the house had settled into uneasy quiet, Ethan found her standing alone near the conservatory, the sound of distant thunder rolling over the valley. "Why didn't you defend yourself?" he asked. "You could have told them the truth." She looked out the window where the rain had begun again, faint against the glass. "Because people believe what they want to," she said. "And because I've learned that sometimes silence is the only thing that doesn't cost you your dignity." Her words hit him harder than accusation ever could. He saw in her the reflection of his own guardedness, the difference being that her silence came from pain, while his came from pride. He wanted to say something, apology, admiration, something human, but the words wouldn't form. Instead, he simply said, "You're safe here, Lillian. I promise that." Rex appeared at the doorway then, shaking the rain from his coat before padding to her side. The dog sat between them, eyes gentle as if bridging the distance neither dared to cross. Outside, lightning flashed across the ridge, illuminating the glass walls in brief silver light. For the first time, Ethan realized that trust, like the storm, didn't destroy what was strong. It revealed it. And for Lillian Hart, that night, the world finally felt like it might stop testing her. Winter melted quietly into spring at Coal Ridge Estate, trading the cold blue stillness of snow for the soft hum of thawing earth and birds returning to the valley. The once frozen garden bloomed again, first with shy crocuses and then with bright daffodils that pushed their way through the soil as though defying the past. For the first time in years, the house felt alive. Ethan Cole stood by the veranda railing one early morning, coffee in hand, watching Rex chase a drifting leaf across the lawn. The dog's sleek black and tan coat shimmered in the sunlight. 4 years old now, Rex had grown calmer, wiser, no longer the relentless sentinel he once was, but a loyal shadow to his master's newfound peace. Ethan smiled faintly. "You've gone soft," he murmured. Rex barked once as if answering. "So have you." It had been 3 months since the night of the gala, the night that shifted something fundamental inside Ethan. Gone was the man who measured loyalty through suspicion. He had started greeting his staff by name, lingering a little longer in the kitchen when Sarah Delgado, the pastry chef, teased him about his poor coffee taste. Sarah, round-faced and warm-eyed, had always filled the house with laughter that smelled faintly of vanilla and butter. Now, Ethan found himself looking forward to it. Margaret O'Neill, too, noticed the change. "You're smiling before noon, Mr. Cole," she said one morning while polishing the silver trays. "I was starting to think the sun had to bribe you for that." Her gray eyes twinkled behind her glasses. Ethan had no clever reply, only a quiet chuckle. It felt unfamiliar, that sound, like trying on a coat he hadn't worn in years and finding it still fit. As for Lillian Hart, she remained steady in her routines, dusting, organizing, tending to the gardens. But her presence carried a new serenity. Since the gala, Ethan had noticed that she walked a little lighter. Her laughter came easier, and sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she hummed. It was Margaret who told him one afternoon that Lillian had been inquiring about medical programs again. She said she wanted to finish what she started, the housekeeper said, while rearranging a vase of tulips. Said her father used to tell her that healing people was a kind of prayer. Ethan didn't respond right away. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, he sat in his study under the muted glow of a single lamp. His pen hovered over a sheet of paper stamped with the insignia of the Hawthorne Foundation, one of his private trusts, the kind that funded scholarships without names attached. He wrote carefully, in his slanted handwriting, "Full tuition, living stipend, for Miss Lillian Hart, Bozeman Medical Program." When the envelope was sealed and ready for delivery, he placed it inside his drawer beside a half-finished glass of whiskey. Rex raised his head from the rug, watching him silently. "She deserves it," Ethan said softly. The dog blinked, as though agreeing. Weeks passed before the morning arrived when the postman's van rolled up the gravel driveway, leaving a stack of letters on the front table. Lillian found hers among the pile, a simple white envelope bearing no name, only the logo of a medical university. She read it twice before the meaning sank in. A full scholarship. Housing covered. All fees waived. Her hands trembled as she sat down on the edge of the stairway, the paper crinkling in her grasp. That afternoon, she found Ethan in the garden trimming the lavender shrubs. The air was warm and fragrant, sunlight spilling through the budding branches. Rex lay nearby, half asleep, paws crossed. "Mr. Cole," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned, pruning shears still in hand. "Lillian, you look like someone just saw a ghost." I got accepted," she said, holding up the letter. "The scholarship covers everything." Ethan's brow lifted slightly, his expression composed. "That's wonderful news." She searched his face, uncertain. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about this foundation, would you?" He wiped his hands on his gloves. "I've heard of it. They help people who deserve second chances." For a moment, she said nothing. Then her eyes softened, glistening faintly under the light. You didn't have to. Maybe I did, he said quietly. You've spent enough time mending what others broke. It's time someone helped you do the same for yourself. Rex stretched and stood, padding toward her, his tail wagging once before he pressed his head against her knee. Lillian crouched, stroking his ears. You knew, didn't you? She whispered to the dog. You always know. She looked up at Ethan then. I'll be leaving in a week. He nodded once, his throat tightening in a way he hadn't expected. The house will feel empty. I'll miss it, she said. All of it, the garden, Margaret, even Sarah's scolding. Ethan smiled faintly. She'll miss having someone to share her pastries with. When the day of her departure came, the house gathered quietly in farewell. Margaret hugged her, whispering something only they could hear. Sarah handed her a small box of baked goods for the road, wrapped in twine. Jonah, the groundskeeper, tipped his hat from across the yard. And Rex, sensing the change, whined softly, circling her legs before sitting obediently at her feet. Ethan walked her to the front gate. The air smelled of pine and lavender, the mountains hazy in the distance. Thank you for everything, she said, tears threatening to spill but held back by resolve. You earned everything yourself, he replied. But if one day you ever want to come back, this house will still be here. He hesitated, then added, So will I. Rex barked once, as if echoing the promise. Lillian knelt to hug the dog. Goodbye, soldier. As the car drove away, Ethan stood watching until it disappeared over the hill. For a long time he remained there, one hand resting on Rex's head, the wind playing softly through the lavender bushes. 6 months later, summer returned to Montana with its golden light and humming bees. The lavender fields behind the estate had reached full bloom, their scent filling the warm air. Ethan, now accustomed to simpler habits, was kneeling by the flower beds with pruning shears in hand when the front gate creaked open. A figure appeared, silhouetted against the fading sun. Lillian Hart, her hair a little longer, her posture still as graceful as the first day she arrived. She wore a pale dress and carried a small parcel in her hands. Ethan rose slowly, surprise softening into something gentler. You came back, he said. I thought I'd visit the lavender, she replied, smiling. And the man who planted it. Rex bounded forward, tail wagging furiously, circling her like a child reunited with family. She laughed, crouching to greet him. Then she stood and handed Ethan the small box. Inside was a folded handkerchief, white with gold embroidery. Along one corner were the initials E and L. This time, she said softly, I want you to keep it. Ethan looked at the gift for a long moment, then back at her. I will. The wind stirred through the lavender, carrying their shared silence like a melody. Rex lay down between them, tail flicking lazily, as the last of the sun dipped behind the hills. For the first time, Ethan didn't think of the past, only of the woman standing before him, the dog at their feet, and the quiet certainty that some stories don't end. They just find where they were always meant to begin. Sometimes, the greatest miracles don't come wrapped in light or thunder from the heavens. They arrive quietly, in a kind gesture, in forgiveness freely given, or in the courage to trust again. Ethan found his miracle not in wealth or success, but in the simple grace of a woman who refused to stop believing in goodness. And Lillian discovered that faith, when nurtured by love and compassion, can rebuild even the most broken hearts. Perhaps that's what God's miracles truly are. Not flashes of power, but moments when we choose kindness over doubt, and love over fear. Each time we forgive, each time we help someone rise, we become part of that divine work. So tonight, take a moment to look around your own life. Maybe your miracle is closer than you think, in the people who stand beside you, in the quiet loyalty of a dog, or in the peace that follows a simple act of trust. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a little reminder that goodness still exists. Leave us a comment about your own small miracles, moments where you felt God's hand guiding you. And don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, where faith, love, and hope come alive in every tale. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He fill your days with gentle light, and may every act of kindness you share become someone else's miracle.